I once thought I had married the right man, until, on my wedding night, a strange woman slipped money into my hand and whispered, "Run, before you disappear, like my daughter." From that moment on, my marriage turned to ashes, and the truth about the Callahan family began to surface like a long-sunken corpse.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
My name is Monica Evans. I'm 38 years old, and what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. I used to believe there are nights that feel like promises, quiet, golden things that wrap around you and whisper, "You're safe now." That evening in Charleston was exactly that kind of night, or at least it pretended to be. The restaurant glowed with soft amber light, each candle flickering like it had been instructed to perform tenderness. Andrew held my hand across the white tablecloth, thumb brushing my knuckle in a motion so practiced, it almost felt rehearsed. Maybe it always had been. Maybe I was the only one who didn't know I was in a scene someone else had scripted. Voiceover, the memory of my own voice. After 38 years, I thought I'd finally found a man who made the world quiet. Andrew felt like a reward for all the loneliness I'd swallowed. I believed that. God, I believed that with my whole chest. He smiled as the waiter poured our wine. "To new beginnings," he said. I wanted to believe him more than I wanted to breathe. And then, the fracture. His phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. Andrew glanced at the screen, expression tight for a split second before he replaced it with that calm corporate smile he used when he didn't want me to think too much. "Business call, sweetheart," he murmured. 2 minutes tops. 2 minutes. I nodded like a dutiful newlywed, even though the word business always tasted metallic when he said it. He kissed my forehead and stepped away from the table, phone pressed to his ear, voice low, tone clipped. That was the moment the night inhaled sharply and exhaled something cold. I didn't notice the woman until her shadow crossed my table. She was older, maybe in her late 60s, with silver hair pulled into a neat bun that trembled ever so slightly, like even her hair was holding a memory it didn't want to remember. Her eyes were sunken, frantic, searching. I recognized her in that strange, instant way. You sometimes recognize people who were never meant to cross your path. It took me a second to place her. Then it clicked. Grace Holloway, a customer at my gallery, quiet, polite, always buying small landscape prints that looked like places someone wanted to return to but couldn't. I opened my mouth to ask if she was all right. She didn't give me the chance. She dropped a thick roll of cash onto my lap with a trembling hand. Her voice was barely a whisper, but the urgency in it sliced through the warm restaurant buzz like broken glass. "Run!" I froze. Her fingers tightened around my wrist, cold and desperate. "Run, right now," she breathed. "Please, I only just escaped him." My pulse stuttered. I felt the fork slip from my hand, clattering against the plate with an embarrassingly loud ring. Heat flushed up my neck, then died instantly into a shiver so sharp I swear I felt every vertebra in my spine turn to ice. Run? Escape? From who? From Andrew? No. Impossible. Andrew loved me, didn't he? He took care of me. He called me darling in that low voice, held my waist when I crossed the street even if I didn't need help. He planned this whole honeymoon weekend to make me feel cherished. He said that word, cherished, like it meant something. This woman must have been mistaken, confused, or unwell. But her eyes were not the eyes of a confused woman. They were the eyes of someone who had seen the inside of a nightmare and crawled out bleeding. "I know who you are," Grace whispered, "and I know who he is. You need to leave before he comes back." I swallowed, or tried to. My throat felt too tight, too small for air. "Ma'am, I think you're confusing my husband with someone." She shook her head violently. "His name is Andrew Callahan," she said, tears slipping into the corners of her voice. "My daughter Alyssa married him, and then she disappeared." The restaurant walls spun, blurring into warm yellow streaks. My hand gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles whitened. Every instinct inside me, every rational bone, wanted to dismiss this, to call it madness, but my skin reacted before my mind could. A chill, a warning, a deep, ancestral no. Suddenly the restaurant lights felt too bright, the air too thick, The room too small. Please, she whispered again. I barely got away. I can't let the same thing happen to you. Before I could respond, the door chimed. 2 men in dark leather jackets stepped inside, scanning the room with unsettling coordination. Their eyes swept from table to table until they landed, dead center on me. Their focus tightened. Something inside my chest locked into place. Grace's grip intensified. He sent them. They're here for you. Her voice cracked. Run, Monica. My breath stopped. Not on purpose. My body simply forgot how. Outside, through the front windows, I saw Andrew pacing on the phone. Expression unreadable, back turned to the restaurant. I had a choice. Believe the man I married, or believe the terror in this stranger's eyes. My instincts made the choice for me. I slid out of the chair so quickly it toppled, heart hammering, palms sweating. I didn't grab my purse. I didn't grab my coat. Something primal in me took control. My mother would have called it women's intuition, the kind that arrives only when danger is real. I ducked past the kitchen hallway, forcing my shaking legs to move faster, faster, until I burst into the restroom. The metallic scent of industrial soap filled the air. I ran to the window, only to find iron bars bolted across it. A cage. I felt dizzy, sick, betrayed by a window that should have been freedom. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. Think, Monica. Think, damn it, think. I fumbled for my phone. My fingers wouldn't cooperate, but somehow I managed to tap the rideshare app. Taxi ETA. 3 minutes. 3 minutes felt like an eternity and a single breath at the same time. Behind me, a floor tile creaked. Footsteps, not many, just one. Slow, heavy, Cole, the manager. A man who'd been overly polite all evening. Too polite. Ma'am, he called softly. Your husband is looking for you. My stomach clenched. I bolted for the door. But when I stepped out into the hallway, Andrew was already there, calm, smiling, perfect. But his eyes were dead. Honey, he murmured, reaching for me. I know everything feels overwhelming. You're sensitive after your father's death. You're exhausted. He stroked my arm, a gesture meant to soothe. Instead, it burned like acid. Come back to the table, he whispered. Let's not make a scene. His words dripped with gentle poison, gaslighting, manipulation so smooth it felt like velvet. I stepped backward. Andrew, what's going on? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence told the truth. And in that silence, I finally heard the sound I'd been ignoring since the moment I met him. The quiet, steady hum of danger. I ran. Panic has a taste. I learned that in the minutes after I fled Andrew in that hallway. It tastes like metal, like something burning at the back of your throat. It tastes like the truth you don't want but can't spit out. I pushed through the kitchen doors and slipped out the emergency exit before anyone noticed, stumbling into the cool Charleston night. My pulse was a frantic bird trapped inside my ribs. I didn't breathe again until the city sounds swallowed me. Distant horns, muffled laughter, the low hum of a Friday evening that had nothing to do with me anymore. The taxi I'd called was 3 blocks down, stuck at a light. Too far, too slow. I ducked into the nearest alley, hands braced against the brick wall as I tried to steady myself. My legs were shaking so violently I thought they might collapse. Grace's face flashed in my mind. Her haunted eyes, her desperate whisper. Run. I just escaped him. My daughter disappeared. He's done this before. The words ricocheted through me, each one sharper than the last. For a terrible, fleeting second, I tried to convince myself she was wrong. Mistaken identity, delusion, a grieving mother attaching her nightmare to the first man with a familiar face. Except, it didn't feel like that. Her fear wasn't unhinged. It was precise, lived in, experienced. It was the kind of terror you earned. And deep down, buried under my denial and my pride and the fantasy I'd built around Andrew, something inside me agreed with her. I didn't want it to, but it did. The taxi pulled up with a screech. I lunged inside, slamming the door. Where to? The driver asked. I opened my mouth and no words came out. I didn't know where safety was anymore. My gallery? Too public. Home? Andrew would go there first. A hotel? He'd find the card authorization in minutes. Friends? He'd charm them, manipulate them, convince them I was confused again. I swallowed hard. Just drive for now, I'll tell you. The taxi rolled forward, blending into Charleston traffic. I pressed my forehead to the cool window, replaying the moment Grace had approached my table. The way her hands had trembled. The way her voice cracked when she said her daughter's name, Alyssa. A girl who had had a life, a future, a mother who loved her. And then, nothing. My stomach twisted. I recognized Grace because she'd visited my gallery several times, always alone, always hovering at the portrait wall longer than any other customer. I remembered her staring at a particular photograph, a young woman standing beside a lake, the sun cutting a gold line over her shoulders. I'd assumed she simply liked it. Now I understood. She was trying to remember her daughter in the light. I whispered into my cupped hands, "Oh God, what if she was telling the truth?" The idea was unimaginable, unthinkable. Yet the longer I sat with it, the more the pieces rearranged themselves, forming shapes I'd tried not to acknowledge for months. Andrew's secrets, his sudden trips, his little lies hidden in compliments, his tendency to redirect conversations so smoothly I barely noticed, the way he always needed to handle our finances because he was better with numbers, the friend groups I never met, the stories about his past that changed slightly each time he told them. They were all red flags. I'd just painted them white. A vibration buzzed in my purse. My heart plummeted. Andrew Callahan, incoming call. I hit decline. He called again. Decline. Then a text. "Where are you, sweetheart? Let's talk. I'm worried." I threw the phone onto the seat beside me like it was capable of biting. The driver shot me a concerned look in the mirror. "You okay back there?" No, I wasn't. But I couldn't say that. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just keep going." I needed answers, not comfort. And there was only one person who could give them to me. I pulled the wad of cash from my coat pocket, the money Grace had forced into my hands. Then I dug through my contacts until I found her name. Grace H., gallery client. I pressed call. It rang once, twice. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was fragile, hopeful, terrified. "It's Monica," I whispered. From the Yellow Harbor Gallery. Silence. Then a trembling exhale. "You got away." I closed my eyes. "Yes. Where are you? I need to understand what's going on." "Meet me," she said immediately. "Please, I can't talk on the phone." He monitors things. Monitors. The word felt like a knife. I gave the driver the address. When we pulled up to a small, aging townhouse tucked between two magnolia trees, I hesitated. The porch light flickered. The windows were dark. It looked like a place where grief lived. Grace opened the door before I even knocked. She looked smaller now, somehow. Older. Like fear had hollowed her out. But the moment she saw me, her expression softened into something heartbreakingly maternal. "You came," she whispered. I nodded. I had to. Inside, her home smelled like lavender and old books. A kettle whistled faintly in the kitchen. She motioned for me to sit, hands shaking as she placed a mug of chamomile tea in front of me. The warmth felt foreign against my cold palms. Grace sat across from me, folding and unfolding a napkin. "My daughter," she began, voice fragile as thin ice, "was bright, kind, smarter than me by a mile. When she met Andrew, she said he made her feel seen, special." My chest tightened. She married him 3 months later. We celebrated in this room. Her eyes glistened. That was the last happy day I had. "What happened to her?" I asked softly. Grace swallowed, then reached for a leather-bound notebook on the coffee table. She held it with reverence, as if it were radioactive but precious. "Alyssa kept a journal," she said. "She wrote everything. Down, her dreams, her doubts, her secrets." Grace opened it to a page where the handwriting grew slanted. Urgent. I leaned forward. The entry read, "He isn't who he says he is. I think he's watching me. I'm scared. If anything happens to me, it's Andrew." My heartbeat thrashed against my ribs. "And then?" I whispered. Grace's face crumpled. "Then she vanished. Police found her car abandoned near the marsh, but no body, no trace." I covered my mouth, swallowing a sob. "She wasn't the first," Grace added, voice hollow. I've spent years trying to prove it. No one listened. Why tell me? My voice cracked. Her hand reached across the table, gripping mine with the fierce, shaking strength of a mother desperate to save someone. Because, she whispered, you look like her. Because he married you the same way. Because tonight, when I saw you sitting there, I knew. Her breath hitched. I saw the same softness he preys on, and I couldn't lose another girl. Tears welled in my eyes, hot, humiliating, raw. I don't know who to believe, I admitted. I don't want to believe any of this. Grace squeezed my fingers. Then don't believe me. Believe your instincts. The house fell silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. In that silence, I acknowledged what I had felt in the restaurant, what I felt in the alley, what I felt now, sitting across from a mother who had already buried her hope once. My instincts were screaming, and for the first time in my life, I listened. Grace, I whispered, what do we do? Her eyes, though weary, burned with purpose. We fight, she said, together. There's a thin line between panic and clarity, one sharp enough to cut you the moment you realize your life has stopped being yours. When I fled Andrew in that hallway, it wasn't graceful or cinematic. My heels skidded on the polished floor, my breath coming out in broken gasps as I pushed into the restroom and locked the door. My reflection stared back at me, lipstick fading, hair loosened from its perfect waves, eyes blown wide with something that looked too much like the beginning of truth. This was supposed to be my honeymoon dinner. Instead, I looked like a woman trying to outrun her own funeral. I turned toward the small restroom window, a desperate, irrational hope. But reality struck like a slap. Iron bars, thick, permanent. A silent message. No one leaves through here. I grabbed the bars, shaking them even though I knew they wouldn't budge. Who bars a bathroom window in a high-end Charleston restaurant? Someone who cares more about keeping people in than keeping thieves out. My phone buzzed. Andrew. Where are you, sweetheart? I'm worried. His words used to feel warm. Now they felt like hands closing around my throat. My fingers trembled as I opened the rideshare app. Taxi ETA, 3 minutes, 3 minutes. I just needed to survive 3 minutes. I stepped onto the toilet to hide my feet, clutching my phone like a lifeline. Footsteps entered the restroom, not hurried, measured, confident. Mrs. Callahan, Cole, the restaurant manager. My pulse stopped. Your husband is looking for you, he said, voice falsely gentle. Why don't you come out? He's worried about your stress. Stress. Episodes. Sensitivity. Words Andrew loved to weaponize. I forced my voice steady. I need a minute. Cole stepped closer, too close. Ma'am, your husband asked that we don't let you leave alone. After your father's passing, emotions can be unpredictable. My chest tightened, a mix of rage and terror. So what? I whispered. He told you I'm unstable? Cole hesitated. He said you've been overwhelmed, that this behavior isn't like you. I realized what was happening. Andrew was already rewriting the narrative, turning my escape into hysteria, turning his control into protection, making me the unreliable narrator of my own life. Every second I stayed in that bathroom, my freedom shrank. Open the door, Mrs. Callahan, Cole finally said. Please, we don't want a scene. Something in his tone told me the scene he feared wasn't for my sake, but for Andrew's. My phone buzzed again. Your driver has arrived. Hope shot through me like an electric jolt. I climbed down, unlocked the door, and instantly regretted it. Cole pushed it open and filled the frame, preventing escape. Let's go see your husband, he said, guiding me. No, I jerked back. I'm leaving. My car is here. Cole glanced at the screen in my hand. His smile faltered. Ma'am, that won't be possible. What do you mean not possible? Mr. Callahan doesn't want you leaving in this emotional state. This emotional state, I repeated, stunned. He lowered his voice. He said you've had episodes before. I haven't, I said sharply. And you don't know me, Cole didn't flinch. But I trust him. He's been nothing but reasonable. Reasonable. A man who hid rage under charm. A man a grieving mother had just warned me about. Then, before I could react, Andrew appeared behind me, calm, groomed, smiling like a man who loved his wife, his eyes cold as steel. There you are, he murmured. You scared me. He reached for my hand. I pulled back. A woman told me you married her daughter, I said. She disappeared. His expression didn't crack, not even a flicker. Instead, he laughed softly. Oh, sweetheart, is that what this is? Cole's shoulders relaxed. The story was already writing itself. She followed us, Andrew continued. I've told you about her, how she fixates on that one photo at your gallery. She's unstable, grieving. She tries to attach her tragedy to strangers. He was so smooth I almost believed him. Almost. But I remembered Grace's trembling hands, the terror in her voice, the journal she clutched like a lifeline. And I remembered how my body reacted when Andrew touched me earlier. A chill so instinctive it couldn't be logic. Monica, Andrew said softly, tilting my chin as if we were in some romantic drama. You've been tired. Ever since your dad. I know grief makes things feel bigger than they are. He said grief with precision, like a surgeon pressing directly into a wound. I'm not imagining this, I whispered. I'm not overreacting. Of course you're not, he cooed. But let's not discuss this in a hallway. Come with me to the private room. We'll sort this out. Just us. Private room. Closed door. No witnesses. Cole nodded approvingly. Everything about the scene was rigged for Andrew to win. My taxi outside was the only real chance I had left. But Andrew stood between me and the exit, Cole blocking the other side. It wasn't a restaurant anymore. It was a funnel, a trap, a stage built for my obedience. I swallowed hard. I needed to think, not react. If I resisted now, they'd physically escort me somewhere I couldn't escape. I had to play along long enough to survive. Okay, I breathed. I'll talk. Andrew smiled, victory sliding across his face like oil over water. Good girl, he whispered. My skin crawled. He guided me toward the private dining room, his hand firm on my back. I didn't fight it, not yet. As the door clicked shut behind us, sealing me into a small room with the man I now knew I couldn't trust, a single thought flashed through my mind. I might be trapped, but I wasn't blind anymore. And the part of me that had shattered tonight was already sharpening into something else. A part that would break out. A part that would fight. A part that would survive. Whatever Andrew was. He hadn't met that part of me yet. The private dining room door shut behind us with a soft, final click. The kind of sound you don't notice in a normal moment, but that becomes deafening when you know you're not supposed to be on the other side of it. Andrew let go of my back only when he was sure there was no escape route behind me. The room was small, a table draped in white linen, 2 chairs, dim sconces on the walls, a single window, sealed and too high to reach. It felt less like a restaurant, and more like an interrogation chamber decorated with expensive taste. He pulled out a chair for me, smiling. Sit, sweetheart. I didn't. He raised an eyebrow, amusement flickering across his face like a match about to burn down something important. You're angry, he said calmly. That's all right. We can talk like adults. I forced myself to breathe, to stay still, to keep my panic from betraying me. Panic was loud. Panic made mistakes, but clarity, even painful clarity, was quiet. What do you want to talk about? I asked. I wasn't actually asking. I was buying time, counting the seconds, listening for footsteps outside, hoping the taxi driver wouldn't leave immediately. Andrew leaned his hip against the table, arms folded. His wedding ring caught the warm light and flashed like a blade. I want to talk about the woman who approached you, he said. Grace Holloway. I stiffened. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Andrew noticed everything people didn't want him to. You didn't tell me her name, I said softly. He smiled. You said she's been to your gallery. You forget I've lived with you, Monica. I hear things. I see patterns. I warned you about people who attach themselves to you because they sense kindness. My stomach turned. He tilted his head, studying me like I was an object he was appraising. She told you something, didn't she? She said she escaped you, I whispered. Andrew laughed, a quiet, warm chuckle that sounded harmless enough to fool anyone who wasn't living this moment. He placed a hand over his heart. Oh, honey. Don't call me that. He paused. The smile stayed, but the warmth drained out of his eyes. All right, Monica. He walked closer, slowly, deliberately. My fingers curled around the back of the chair behind me, gripping the wood until my knuckles whitened. That woman's daughter suffered from psychosis, he said evenly. She projected delusions onto everyone she met. Grace is deeply traumatized and deeply unstable. I've tried to help her before, donated to her support fund, tried to pay for her counseling. Every word felt rehearsed. But she twists generosity into threat, Andrew murmured. And the moment she saw you, she saw a new fixation point. You're lying, my voice cracked. He didn't even blink. I'm protecting you. His version of protection tasted like someone else's blood. Grace said her daughter married you, I whispered. She said her daughter disappeared. He stepped even closer, too close. And did she show you evidence? He asked gently. Photos, documents, a marriage certificate? Or did she just give you a story that preyed on your guilt and your grief? Something inside me snapped. Not enough to make me scream, not enough to make me run, but enough to shatter the last piece of the old Andrew I had tried to cling to. That doesn't explain the men who walked into the restaurant, I said. Looking for me, he shrugged. Private security. I hire them sometimes when I do late meetings. Charleston isn't as safe as you think. I stared at him. Bold lies, smooth delivery, absolute certainty. This wasn't gaslighting anymore. This was rewriting the universe. We're leaving, he said suddenly. I already asked the staff to pack the desserts and handle the check. No, I said immediately. I'm not going anywhere with you. Andrew didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. Instead, he let silence fill the room until it pressed on my skin like cold water. Monica, he said finally, you're overwhelmed. You're scared. You've let a stranger's delusion shake you, and all I want is to bring you somewhere safe. Safe, I whispered. With you. His jaw twitched. There it was, the crack in the mask. For the first time that night, I saw the real Andrew flicker through. Not charming, not patient, not the man who held open doors and whispered sweet things into my hair, but a man who could wait years for the perfect moment to swallow someone whole. Sit, he said again, no warmth now, just command. My heart hammered so hard I felt it in my teeth. No. He stepped toward me. I stepped back. His hand shot out, grabbing my wrist hard enough that pain shot up my arm. My breath strangled in my throat. You're not thinking clearly, he hissed. I'm thinking clearly, I spat, yanking my arm. For the first time, his grip tightened. Then, a knock on the door. Andrew froze. So did I. Mr. Callahan? Cole's voice floated in. There's a small issue with your payment. Could you come take a look? Payment. He hadn't paid yet. That meant the door had to open. Andrew held my gaze for a long, charged second, anger pulsing beneath his expression like a restrained snarl. Then he loosened his grip. Don't move, he whispered. He opened the door just enough to speak to Cole. Their voices dipped low, indistinguishable murmurs. Andrew stepped fully outside, leaving the door cracked open. In that instant, my survival instinct rose like a force of nature. Move. Now. Earthquake level now. I dived toward the wall-mounted fire alarm, a tiny red box behind the table. I'd noticed it earlier, half hidden in the dim light. My pulse slammed. My fingers fumbled for my bag, the metal clasp cold and solid in my hands. I swung it hard, once, twice, crack. The alarm shattered. The sprinkler system groaned. And then the restaurant erupted in chaos. Sirens blared. Sprinklers blasted from the ceiling. Water rained over the pristine tablecloths. People screamed in the hallway. Smoke, real smoke, billowed from the kitchen. Whether it was coincidence or divine intervention, it didn't matter. It was cover, and I needed cover. I ran. Andrew lunged through the doorway, shouting my name, water soaking through his shirt in sheets. His expression twisted. Not concerned, not gentle, but furious. Finally unmasked. I dodged between panicked guests, slipping on the slick floor, pushing past servers trying to guide people outside. The building throbbed with noise. The air stung with heat and panic. The front doors burst open as customers flooded out into the street. I shoved through the crowd, heart thundering. There, my taxi driver, looking around in confusion as alarms shrilled. I sprinted toward the car. Monica! Andrew roared behind me, so close I could hear the slap of his shoes on the pavement. I didn't look back. I dove into the taxi, slamming the door. Go! I screamed. Just drive! The driver floored it. Andrew's face flashed in the rear window, drenched, livid, a shape carved from darkness. The restaurant shrank behind us. My breaths came sharp and painful, each one a reminder that I was still alive. Barely, but alive, for now. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the terror, something else was coiling to life. A spark, a seed, a beginning. The part of me that would not run forever. The part of me that would one day turn around. There's a strange silence that comes after you outrun terror. Not peace, not relief. A hollow, suspended quiet, like the world is holding its breath along with you, waiting to see if you survive the next 10 minutes. That was the silence inside the taxi. The driver kept glancing at me through the rearview mirror, clearly trying to figure out whether I'd been in a fight, a fire, or both. My soaked dress clung to my skin. My hair stuck to my cheekbones. Mascara streaked down my face like soot. "Where to, ma'am?" he asked. My mind stalled. The only clear, solid place that appeared through the fog was my studio, my space, my rules, my lock, my lease signed long before Andrew ever learned my middle name. "Bay Street," I whispered. "The Yellow Harbor Studio, please?" He nodded and turned toward the older part of Charleston, where the streets narrowed and the tourists thinned out. The hum of the engine blurred under my heartbeat, still pounding like it didn't trust that we were really moving away from him. As the taxi rolled past the riverfront, the wind from the cracked window cooled my shoulders, reminding me I was no longer drenched by sprinklers or choking on smoke. Reminding me I'd actually escaped the private dining room where Andrew had tried to contain me like a problem, like an inconvenience. I kept seeing that flash of fury on his face when the alarm went off. Brief, raw, undeniable. It wasn't the anger of a worried husband. It was the anger of a man whose plan had been interrupted. When the taxi finally slowed in front of my studio building, my lungs expanded for the first time in over an hour. The sign above the door, Yellow Harbor, glowed faintly in the streetlight. My little haven. "You need me to wait?" the driver asked gently. It was oddly kind, that offer. And for half a second, every scared part of me wanted to nod, crawl into the passenger seat, and tell him to drive until we ran out of gas. But running wasn't a strategy. It was a pause button. "No," I said softly. "Thank you." The bell on the gallery door chimed when I stepped inside, a familiar sound that almost made my knees buckle. I locked the door, then shoved a heavy display table against it. An instinctive act, maybe unnecessary, but necessary to me. The motion lights flicked on, casting warm pools of light over the frames lining the walls. Photos I'd taken over the years stared back at me. Quiet alleys, lonely beaches, strangers laughing on corners, that now felt like artifacts from a life that had belonged to someone else. I slipped off my heels and climbed the stairs to the loft studio. Up there, surrounded by paintbrushes, camera lenses, and canvases in mid-progress, I finally let myself collapse onto the old couch. The cushions inhaled under me, deeply familiar, soft in the way only frequently sat-on furniture can be. My hands shook violently, like my body was releasing the fear it had been forced to hold while I ran. "You're okay," I whispered. "You're okay." But the words didn't sink in. They bounced off the walls and fell flat. I stood and walked to the sink, turning on the faucet. The water ran loud in the stillness as I splashed my face again and again, watching streaks of mascara swirl down the drain like black watercolor. In the small mirror above the sink, I saw the truth. I didn't look afraid. I looked stripped, bare, haunted, awake in a way I had never been before. I grabbed a towel, pressing it against my face as I walked back to the sofa. My phone buzzed in my hand, almost violently. Messages from Andrew, missed calls, voicemails. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I opened my banking app, something in Grace's trembling voice echoing inside me. He took everything from her. The screen loaded slowly, too slowly. Finally, my savings account, nearly drained. My checking, reduced to numbers that looked like typos. Transfer history, small withdrawals over months. So subtle I wouldn't have noticed unless I was looking. My breath hitched. I checked the joint account. Error, account restricted. I checked my credit cards, declined. Card frozen. Restricted at account holder request. My vision tunneled. Another notification buzzed through. Recent changes have been made to your accounts per request of your spouse, Andrew Callahan. It felt like the floor disappeared under me, like someone had pulled a trapdoor I didn't know I was standing on. My body folded forward, elbows on my knees, hands gripping my hair. I had trusted him with everything, my home, my daily routines, my grief, my vulnerabilities. And he had used all of it as architecture for a cage I didn't see until I was already inside. I thought of Alyssa, Grace's trembling hands, the journal page that said, "If anything happens to me, it's Andrew." Now I understood why she wrote it. My phone buzzed again. I nearly threw it across the room. This time, it wasn't Andrew. It was another bank alert. An attempt was made to log into your financial profile from your home address. Our home. The apartment where Andrew was probably sitting right now, where I used to sleep beside him, believing the warmth was love instead of surveillance. My stomach twisted. He was checking my accounts, tracking what I had left, calculating his next move. And if he couldn't find me at the restaurant, home would have been his next stop. My fingers clenched into a fist so tight my nails dug into my palm. I wasn't safe, not really, not yet. But I was hidden, and I still had something he wasn't expecting. I knew the truth now. Fear settled into a sharp electric clarity. My dad used to tell me, "Kiddo, courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's just a woman standing alone in a dark room saying, 'Not like this.'" I stood up, slowly, not dramatically, but with a weight behind my spine that hadn't been there in hour ago. I walked to the window. Outside, Charleston glowed softly. Tourists laughing, cars rolling past. The world blissfully unaware that my life had detonated and rearranged itself tonight. I pressed my palm to the cold glass. "I won't let him erase me," I whispered. The loft didn't respond, but it didn't have to. I could feel the promise in my chest. I would survive this. Not by disappearing, not by running forever, but by fighting back, carefully, quietly, methodically. The freeze wasn't paralysis anymore. It was the moment before motion, before change, before retaliation. I didn't know yet that the next steps would involve Grace, or a key into Margot Callahan's world, or a ledger that would expose everything. All I knew, standing barefoot, shaking, alive, was this. Andrew had started the war, and in this studio, for the first time in years, I felt the beginning of the woman who would finish it. Fear doesn't always come with screaming or shaking. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a hand pressing gently over your mouth. That was the kind of fear sitting beside me on the studio floor at dawn. Quiet, patient, certain. I hadn't slept. Couldn't. My body refused to power down, like it knew something was coming. The sky outside the loft window shifted from ink to deep blue. Morning in Charleston is normally soft. Humidity rising, birds waking, the distant clatter of early delivery trucks. But that morning felt like a held breath. At 7:12 a.m., the spell broke. 3 knocks, sharp, spaced evenly, echoed through the gallery below. My pulse jumped so violently I nearly dropped the mug in my hands. No one knocked that early. No one visited unannounced. Unless Andrew. I froze. The knocking came again. Then a voice, muffled by the door. "Monica, we need to talk." Andrew's voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. Calm Andrew was always more dangerous than angry Andrew. I backed away from the stairs automatically, breath clipped and shallow. He knocked again, firmer this time. "Monica, open the door. Let's stop this." Stop what? Me leaving a restaurant he tried to trap me in? Me surviving, silence. Then the metallic jingling of keys being tested one by one. My lungs seized. He was trying keys. He was trying entry. I dialed 911 on instinct, but my finger hovered, frozen. Rational or not, something inside me whispered that calling the police would give him exactly the narrative he'd been working toward. Unstable wife, grief episodes, paranoia. He'd flipped the script in seconds. I had no proof, no bruises, no witnesses. All I had was fear, and fear never held up in a police report. I backed away so quickly I hit the shelf behind me, bottles and brushes rattling. Then, the keys stopped jingling, a pause, a shift of weight. Then Andrew's voice, lower, colder. Fine. If you won't open the door for me, you'll open it for her. Her? I crept toward the window overlooking the street, peeking between the blinds, and my heart iced over. Margot Callahan, standing beside him in a tailored cream coat, sunglasses perched on her perfectly set hair, looking up at my studio door like she was inspecting a property she already owned. She held a small envelope in her hand, the kind lawyers deliver. Andrew stepped back, letting her move forward. Monica, dear, she called up sweetly. This is all a misunderstanding. We want to bring you home. Home. As if I had any left. I know you're overwhelmed, she continued, her tone dripping with condescension wrapped in velvet. Grief does that. My Andrew told me how fragile you've been lately. Fragile. I didn't realize how hard I was gripping the windowsill until pain radiated through my fingers. Below, Andrew rested a hand on her shoulder, performing perfect family unity. This behavior isn't like you, she added, soft as poison. Running off, causing a scene at a restaurant, triggering a fire alarm. I flinched. So he'd told her everything, or rather, told her his version of everything. Let us help you, she said. Open the door, Monica. Help meant containment. Help meant erasing the parts of me that didn't fit their plan. My chest tightened until breathing became a chore. I backed away from the window and sank onto the floor, covering my mouth to keep from making noise. Below, Andrew's voice sharpened. Come on, don't drag this out. You're making things worse. Something in his tone, flat, rehearsed, stripped of affection, made a truth crystallize in me. He wasn't there out of concern. He was there to finish something, to retrieve what he thought he owned. Before I could tell anyone the truth. My phone buzzed. A message from him. You're not well. Let me take care of you. Don't embarrass yourself more than you already have. Embarrass. There it was again, his favorite weapon. I closed my eyes. They were trying to corner me psychologically since they couldn't get through the door. A car door slammed outside. Another voice floated up. Mrs. Callahan? Andrew? Everything all right here? A security guard from the neighboring building. Young, tall, unaware he'd just stepped into a silent war. Andrew turned to him with the gentlest smile I'd ever seen. Yes, thank you. My wife is having an episode. We just need to get her safely home. My stomach twisted violently. He was building the narrative right in front of me, preloading witnesses, framing me as unstable, planting seeds that would sprout when he needed them. If he got me out of this building, I would not walk back out again intact. I crawled backward until my spine pressed against the wall. The loft felt both too large and too small at the same time. Sweat collected on my palms. I needed to leave. Not later. Now. The knocking grew impatient. Monica, Andrew barked. Open this door before you make this worse. My body flinched at the sound, every muscle recoiling with muscle memory I didn't know I had. Suddenly, the loft wasn't quiet. My mind wasn't quiet. Everything inside me screamed, move. I grabbed my bag, half empty, messy, containing nothing but instinct, and rushed to the back of the loft. There was a fire escape. Old, rusted. Meant for emergencies. This was an emergency. I shoved the small window open. Cold morning air slapped my face. Below, Margot gasped. Andrew shouted something I couldn't make out. Monica, don't you dare! I didn't hesitate. I swung one leg out, then the other. My foot hit the metal grate, the clang echoing like a warning shot. The fire escape rattled under my weight, threatening to collapse, but held. I climbed down 2 flights as fast as my shaking limbs allowed, slipping once, catching myself on the railing. Someone pounded up the gallery stairs behind the door. Someone shouted my name. I didn't look back. I reached the ground, breath ragged, lungs burning. I ran, barefoot, heart exploding, down the narrow alley behind the building. The moment I reached the street, a car pulled up so abruptly I almost screamed. The window rolled down. Grace. Her gray hair was wild from rushing, her eyes frantic but resolute. Get in, she said. Now. I jumped inside. She slammed the gas pedal so hard the tires screeched against asphalt. We sped off just as Andrew rounded the corner behind us, shouting my name. His face twisted into something monstrous and unmistakably real. Grace didn't look back. Neither did I, not because I wasn't afraid, but because now, finally, I knew exactly what I was running toward. Not safety, not escape, but truth. And the beginning of a war I had no choice but to fight. The first thing I felt in Grace's car wasn't safety, it was velocity. Her old sedan lurched forward like it too, understood we were outrunning something alive. My breath was still ragged from the fire escape. I clutched the seatbelt across my chest, fingers trembling from the adrenaline that hadn't had time to settle. The world outside blurred by in smudges of brick buildings and morning light. Grace's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. She didn't look at me, she didn't speak, but everything about her body said, "I have done this before." Only when we turned onto a quiet residential street, lined with old oaks and houses that looked tired but lived in, did she exhale, one deep, breaking breath, like she'd been underwater too long. "Are you hurt?" she asked. Her voice sounded older than yesterday, more cracked, more human. "No," I said, though my heart still hammered in the wrong places. "I'm shaken." She nodded, eyes still forward. Shaken means alive, alive. A bare minimum compliment that suddenly felt like grace. Her house appeared at the end of the road, a small faded blue place with a crooked porch railing and a wind chime made of old spoons that clinked gently in the breeze. It looked nothing like the grand Charleston homes I'd seen Andrew and Margot visit. It looked like survival, not curated, not polished, but human. She parked the car and finally turned to me. Her eyes shimmered with something I couldn't name. Relief, fear, recognition. "Come in," she said softly, "before they find you." My chest tightened at they. I followed her up the walkway. She unlocked the door and pushed it open. The smell hit me instantly, lavender soap, old books, and something warm simmering on the stove. Inside, everything felt lived in. Stacks of magazines on the coffee table, a knitted blanket draped over the couch, photos of a girl with auburn hair, Alyssa, smiling at beaches, hugging a dog, blowing out birthday candles. I stopped in front of one, unable to look away. She looked like someone you'd want to know, someone you'd trust, someone like me. Grace noticed my gaze. Her voice softened, thinning at the edges. She was 26 in that one, happiest I'd seen her, before him, before Andrew. The name sat in the room like smoke. Grace motioned toward the small kitchen. "Sit, you're freezing." I didn't realize until then that my arms were wrapped around myself. I sat at the tiny dining table while she poured soup from a pot. Steam curled upward, carrying the smell of chicken and herbs. When she set the bowl in front of me, my hands hovered over it without thinking, soaking in the warmth. "You cooked?" My voice cracked. "This morning?" "No." She offered a sad smile. "I reheated what I made last night when I couldn't sleep." The spoon clattered slightly against the bowl as I lifted it. I hadn't eaten in hours, maybe longer, but the moment the broth touched my tongue, something inside me loosened, something wounded, something small. "Thank you," I whispered. "You're welcome." She pulled out the chair across from me and sat carefully, like her bones were made of something delicate. For a moment, we just sat there, two women bound not by blood, but by the man who had stolen from both our lives. Then Grace exhaled shakily. "We need to talk about Alyssa." I set the spoon down, my stomach clenched. She reached for a leather notebook sitting on the counter and placed it between us. Alyssa's journal. I felt its weight like a heartbeat under my hand. Grace opened to a marked page. Alyssa's handwriting spilled across it, round, neat, growing increasingly slanted toward the bottom. "He says he loves me, but he loves control more. He checks my accounts daily. I think he's monitoring my phone. If anything happens to me, it's Andrew." My lungs stilled. I traced the ink with a fingertip. "She tried to leave," Grace said, "but he was always a step ahead. Every door she ran to, he'd already locked. Every friend she called, he'd already warned." "How?" I whispered. Grace gave a small, hopeless laugh. "Charm, money, influence. You've seen it." I had. God, I had. Even now, I could picture him standing outside my studio with Margot beside him, spinning his story for the security guard, my grief, my fragility, my episode. He was rewriting my life in real time. "Alyssa loved daisies," Grace said suddenly, as if the memory had floated up uninvited. "Said they were simple and honest." She blinked away tears. She put daisies in her hair the day she married him. The quiet in my chest cracked. I'm so sorry, Grace squeezed her hands together. You have her softness, her way of believing the best in people. When I saw you with him, I felt like I was watching a ghost I hadn't buried properly. I swallowed hard. Why help me? Why risk this again? Her eyes lifted to mine, shining, unflinching. Because, she whispered, I couldn't save her, but I can save you. The words landed with the weight of a vow. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could catch it. Grace reached across the table and took my hand, not gently but firmly, like she was anchoring me to something human after days of drowning. You're not alone, she said, and something inside me that had been clenched so tightly since the restaurant finally cracked open. Grace stood, walked to a drawer near the hallway, and pulled out a small brass key. She set it on the table between us. This, she said, is to Margot Callahan's private office. My breath hitched. I took it when I realized they'd never let me inside again after Alyssa disappeared, she said. There are files locked in her desk, records, contracts, things she assumes no one would dare touch. Why give it to me? My voice felt fragile. Because you have something Alyssa didn't, Grace said. A chance. You know the truth early enough to fight. And her voice faltered. Because she would have wanted someone else to finish what she started. I stared at the key. A door, an opening, a weapon. Are you sure? I whispered. Grace nodded. I trust you, then softer. I trust you the way a mother trusts the person she hands her last hope to. The tears came faster then. Quiet, hot, unstoppable. She didn't look away. She let me feel everything. When I finally wiped my cheeks, Grace spoke again. I have a car in the back. No one knows I own it. We'll go tonight, after dark. We'll get inside Margot's office together. Together. The word felt like a life raft. For the first time since the nightmare began, I wasn't running alone in the dark. I had an ally, a guide, a wounded soul who refused to let anyone else die the way her daughter had. I didn't know what we would find in that office. Whether it would be enough, whether it would be safe, whether we were walking toward evidence or a trap. But I knew this. Whatever came next, I would face it. Not as prey, not as a girl running barefoot through alleys, but as someone rising, someone reclaiming her voice, someone stepping into a war that had already taken too many women. I closed my hand around the brass key. It felt cold, but it felt like purpose. Grace reached out and covered my hand with hers. Monica, she whispered, this time, we finish it. Night settled over Charleston in a way that felt deliberate, like the darkness knew we were preparing to step into something we had no right to survive. Grace barely spoke the entire afternoon. I didn't either. It wasn't avoidance, it was preservation. Some conversations require strength you have to gather in silence. By evening, she placed a sandwich in front of me and said softly, You'll need steady hands tonight. Steady hands. Mine hadn't been steady since the restaurant, but I ate anyway. Her voice made it feel less like a suggestion and more like a survival technique. When the sky turned navy, we stood in her narrow hallway, two women tied together by pain and purpose. I wore borrowed clothes, dark jeans and a black sweater, unremarkable, untraceable. Grace looked like a grandmother heading out for groceries, except for the fire in her eyes. You can still leave, she said. Disappear, start over. I shook my head. If I run, he'll chase. If I fight, he'll bleed. The corner of her mouth lifted, not a smile, just acknowledgement. We slipped into her old sedan. She turned off the radio and drove through Charleston with the precision of someone who'd studied these roads through grief. When we reached the business district, the buildings grew taller, colder, hung with the kind of money that never tangled with consequences. Margot's company headquarters rose ahead, glass, stone, and quiet arrogance. Grace didn't slow near the front. She turned into the alley behind the building, where only a single flickering light illuminated the service entrances. She used the east door when she didn't want anyone knowing she was here, Grace murmured. We stepped out. The pavement was cold beneath my sneakers, the air sharp with the smell of damp brick. A security camera blinked lazily above the entrance. Will it catch us? I whispered. It always catches, she said. But it rarely matters. They think this space belongs only to them. She slid the brass key into the lock. For a heartbeat, I thought it wouldn't work. Then, click. The hallway inside was eerily silent. Thick carpet, dim lights, closed office doors like teeth lining a throat. I wasn't sure whether I was walking into a building or a creature. Grace navigated with certainty, leading us to a large wooden door at the end. Margot Callahan, executive director, engraved in brushed metal. She looked at me once, checking, maybe offering one more chance to run. Then she unlocked it. The office lights revealed a room curated down to the air. Modern art, expensive chairs, perfectly arranged papers. Nothing personal, nothing warm. The space of a woman who never wasted a movement unless it profited her. Desk first, Grace whispered. Top drawers, nothing. Second layer, stationery, folders, a stapler heavier than my fear. Bottom drawer, locked. Of course. I knelt, pulling a bobby pin from my hair. I'd never picked a lock before, but desperation sharpened the world into clean lines. The minutes stretched. Then, a soft, triumphant snap. Inside sat a single object. A gray leather-bound ledger. Plain, unmarked, too ordinary to be harmless. Grace inhaled sharply. That's it. We lifted it onto the desk, opened it. Neat columns filled the first page. Name, date, status, assets, executor. The first entries were strangers, but the pattern was unmistakable. Disappeared spouses, unexpected deaths, transfer of estates, executor in nearly every line, A. Callahan. My skin prickled. Grace's hand trembled as she turned the pages. These are the people I told the police about. No one listened. Page after page. Life after life converted into assets. Then she stopped. Her breath hitched. Alyssa Holloway. Grace's fingers pressed to the name like she could summon her daughter back through ink. Next to it, in chilling handwriting, status, closed. A small cry escaped her, raw and painful. Not a sound meant for the world, but for a mother's aching heart. I held her arm until she steadied. Then she nodded for me to keep going. The further we flipped, the more recent the entries. Fewer names, but more money, more targeted. And then, I saw mine. Monica Evans Callahan, written cleanly, newly, almost proud. Status, in progress. Assets, studio, gallery, joint accounts, investments. Executor, A. Callahan. My breath vanished. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't hysterical. I had been chosen, planned, filed like paperwork awaiting completion. The ledger trembling under my hands wasn't just evidence. It was my obituary, written early. I felt something shift inside me, not fear this time, but clarity so cold and sharp it almost soothed me. I met Grace's eyes. She nodded once, grief and fury braided together. We take it, I said. We take all of it. I pulled out my phone and snapped photos of every page, fast, methodical. Each shutter click felt like reclaiming a part of myself Andrew had tried to erase. When I finished, I slipped the entire ledger into my bag. It fit like it had been waiting for me. We switched off the lights and stepped back into the hallway. Everything sounded louder now. Air vents, distant hums, the soft thud of our footsteps. We moved quickly, hearts synchronized in tension and purpose. Once outside, the night wrapped around us again. Grace locked the door behind us and whispered, "It's real now. We're no longer guessing." I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the ledger pressing against my side. "I'm done being hunted," I said softly. "Tonight, we change roles." Grace slid behind the wheel. "Then let's go show them what happens when women who've lost everything decide to stop losing." As we drove away from the building, its pristine windows reflecting nothing of the rot inside, I realized something. I hadn't just found evidence. I'd found my voice. My name in that ledger wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. A fuse lit. A declaration of war I intended to finish. Civic Hall had never looked intimidating to me before. I'd walked past it dozens of times on my way to the gallery, admiring the marble steps and the old southern columns glowing under evening lights. It always reminded me of a place where people celebrated. Graduations, charity events, orchestras filling the room with warmth. But that night, it felt like a courtroom, a stage, a reckoning. Margot Callahan's charity gala was the social event of the season. One of those polished gatherings where rich people wore benevolence like perfume. Everyone who mattered in Charleston was there. Everyone who didn't matter pretended they were. And somewhere inside that building, waiting to bask in applause, was the woman who had documented the destruction of innocent lives, including mine, in a gray leather ledger she assumed no one would ever touch. She had no idea that ledger was now in my bag. No idea her carefully curated empire was seconds away from imploding, Grace Park 2 blocks away. The night buzzed with crickets and the murmurs of guests gathering at the front entrance, but I barely heard any of it. My heart gave one steady thud after another, as if preparing my body for the weight of what I was about to do. "You don't have to go up there," Grace said quietly. "If you want, I'll speak. I'll say every word myself." Her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, but her gaze was fierce. I shook my head. "No, they won't listen to a grieving mother alone. They'll say you're emotional, hysterical, still unraveling from your daughter's death." Then I met her eyes. "But they'll listen to a wife." Her lips pressed together, sadness and pride blending behind her eyes. "You're braver than she was," she whispered. I reached over and gripped her hand. "No, I'm just finishing what Alyssa started." We stepped out of the car. The pavement glowed under street lamps, and the faint hum of conversations drifted from the hall. A red carpet had been rolled out over the stone steps, flanked by velvet ropes and smiling attendants. I clutched the ledger in my bag like armor. The lobby doors opened with a soft hiss. Warm light poured over us. Inside, the hall looked like a world that didn't believe in pain. Chandeliers glittering like constellations. Champagne flutes catching the light. People in gowns and tuxedos, moving with effortless grace. No one here knew that dozens of lives had been carved apart so people like these could stay comfortable, but they would. Tonight, they would. We slipped into the back of the auditorium just as the lights dimmed and the announcer's voice rang out. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our honoree, Margot Callahan." Polished applause filled the room like a wave. She walked onto the stage with the poise of a queen. Silver gown, pearls, perfectly composed smile. Her eyes didn't show a flicker of worry. No suspicion, no fear. Why would she fear anything? The world had always bent for her. As she took the podium, I swore I saw Andrew seated in the front row, jaw tight, scanning the room. He knew I'd slipped away. He just didn't know how far I'd gone yet. Grace squeezed my hand, silently asking, "Are you ready?" I nodded. And then I walked. Down the aisle, past the rows of glittering people who turned their heads as someone in plain black jeans and a worn sweater marched toward the stage like she belonged there. Margot paused mid-sentence. Andrew stood abruptly, his chair scraping. "Monica." Too late. I stepped up onto the stage stairs. Margot regained her composure with a sharp inhale. "This is a private event," she said, her voice cold but still civil. "You're not scheduled to speak." "No," I said, pulling the ledger from my bag. "But you scheduled me for death." Gasps rippled across the room like wind through a field. Grace stepped forward from the aisle, her presence like a shadow reclaiming its place. I turned to the audience, my voice steady even as my pulse shook the inside of my ribs. "My name is Monica Evans Callahan," I began, "and I married into a family that specializes in quietly erasing people." A murmur spread. I held up the ledger, the light catching its surface. "This book," I said, "contains the names of 7 people whose lives were taken, whose assets were funneled into the pockets of the Callahan family. Their deaths weren't accidents. Their disappearances weren't coincidences. They were planned." Margot blanched. Andrew stepped forward. "Monica," he said, trying to sound calm, polished, in control. "You're unwell. You've always struggled since your father—" "Don't," I snapped. "Don't you dare use my grief to cover your crimes." His jaw twitched. For the first time, his mask slipped in public. People noticed. I opened the ledger to Alyssa's page, read it aloud. Alyssa Holloway. Status closed. Executor A. Callahan. The room went silent. Dead silent. Grace's breath hitched behind me, but she didn't cry. She stood like stone, steady, unmovable, bearing witness. I moved to the next marked page. Ella Harris. Status closed. Executor A. Callahan. Assets transferred. Faces in the audience changed. Techniques perfected over years of polite society cracking under the pressure of truth. Then I turned the ledger to face the crowd and pointed at the bottom line. "And here," I said quietly, "is me." I read aloud, "Monica Evans Callahan. Status, in progress." A shiver moved through the hall. Andrew lunged forward, rage finally breaking free. "Give me that." Security intercepted him before he reached me. "This is a lie," he shouted, pinned by 2 guards. "She's unstable. You can't believe her." Behind him, Margot's face drained of color. She wasn't screaming like Andrew. She was calculating, frantic behind the eyes. A woman in the audience slowly stood, tears filling her eyes. "Ella was my sister," she whispered. "She died in her sleep. They said it was natural." Another man rose. "Theo Bennett, my father. He signed everything over to them before he passed." Another, then another. 4, 5, 6. Families of the ledger's dead rose like ghosts waking. Grace finally stepped beside me, voice shaking but strong. "They took my daughter," she said, "but they don't get to take another." A wave of quiet grief swept over the hall. People weren't applauding anymore. Some cried. Some stared in disbelief. Some shifted, ashamed they had ever celebrated a woman like Margot. The mayor, elegant, composed, stood from his VIP seat near the front. He walked to the stage with a face carved from anger. "Officers," he said, projecting for the entire hall to hear, "place Margot Callahan and Andrew Callahan under arrest, pending investigation for fraud, conspiracy, and potential homicide." Police officers in dress uniforms stepped onto the stage. Margot gasped. Andrew roared. The audience erupted into whispers and shouts. My body felt light, almost unanchored. Grace's hand found mine and squeezed, steady, grounding. The officers cuffed Andrew first. He shot me a look I will never forget. Pure, venomous betrayal. "You ruined everything," he spat. "No," I said quietly. "You did." When they took Margot's wrists and locked the cuffs around them, she didn't look at me. She stared at Grace. Grace nodded once, an old wound closing. As the Callahans were escorted out of the hall under the stunned eyes of Charleston's elite, the noise of the crowd swirled around us. But my world narrowed to one moment. Grace turning to me, tears escaping at last. "You did it," she whispered. "You gave them back their voices." I shook my head. "We did it." And as the stage lights dimmed, I realized something. This wasn't the end of the war. But it was the first time I believed, truly believed, I could win it. I used to think endings came like thunder, loud, dramatic, unforgettable. But the end of the Callahans didn't arrive with fire alarms or shattered glass. It arrived in rooms with humming fluorescent lights and stacks of paperwork. The days after the civic hall were a blur. Police interviews, victim statements, meetings with lawyers who finally treated me like a person instead of a naive wife. Every time someone asked me to start from the beginning, I felt myself shedding another layer of the woman Andrew had tried to sculpt. Andrew's lawyers attempted everything. She's emotional. She's traumatized. She misread his concern as control. But the ledger spoke louder than any of us. Every page, every name, every date. A quiet massacre documented in clean columns. What struck me most wasn't the horror, it was how methodical it all was. Grace and I were allowed to sit together during the interviews. She held herself like a woman being stitched back together, thread by thread. Every time a detective referenced the entry with Alyssa's name, Grace's jaw tightened, but she didn't break. "We fight now," she told me once during a break. Breaking comes later. Slowly, the world shifted. A letter arrived telling me my bank accounts were officially unfrozen. Another confirmed that my studio was protected from any marital claims. A third informed me that multiple families were being contacted with evidence of fraud and forced signature transfers connected to the Callahans. Justice was slow, but it was moving. And for the first time since the nightmare began, I felt like I was moving with it. I didn't return to my old apartment, even after the freeze lifted. It felt like a haunted place, full of his coats, his cologne, his ghost. Instead, I found a small sunlit space closer to my studio. Paint chipped on the windowsill, the floors creaked, and the shower took too long to warm up. But the keys in my hand opened only my doors. Grace helped me unpack. She showed up carrying a ceramic pot with damp soil and 2 tiny green stems poking out. "Daisies," she said. Alyssa's favorites. She believes soft things could grow anywhere if they were patient enough. We repotted them on my balcony. When we finished, we stood there side by side, leaning on the railing, staring down at the delicate leaves. "Monica," Grace said, voice trembling, "you gave me something I thought I'd never have, a place to set my grief down without shame." Her eyes glistened. "I didn't get justice for her, but you did." A knot formed in my throat. "No," I whispered. "You saved me. When you walked to my table in that restaurant, you gave me the truth I didn't know I needed. We didn't hug. We didn't need to." The daisies bent in the wind between us, small, stubborn, impossibly alive. A month later, we went to our first support group, a circle of metal folding chairs in a community center that smelled like lemon cleaner and burnt coffee. The sign on the door said, "Financial and Emotional Abuse Survivors Meeting." People of every age filled the room, some pale from recent trauma, others carrying old wounds in their eyes. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't know where to begin. "My name is Monica," I finally said. "The man I married treated my life as a project, something to acquire, control, and profit from." A few heads nodded. One woman wiped a tear. Another squeezed her partner's hand. I didn't tell them about the ledger or the dramatic forum or Margot's arrest. Not that night. But I told them the one truth that mattered. I thought I was overreacting. I wasn't. If your fear keeps whispering that something is wrong, believe it. Fear is not weakness. Sometimes it's the only part of you that's still fighting. After the meeting, a young woman approached me. "I'm not ready to leave him," she said, fingers twisting her sleeve. "But I think I'm ready to believe myself." I touched her shoulder gently. "That's the first step. Everything else comes after." She nodded, eyes bright with a kind of fragile courage I recognized in my bones. Andrew and Margot eventually took plea deals. Their arrest had shaken Charleston's social foundation like a cracked column. Assets were seized. Trust dissolved. Investigations opened for every name in the ledger. Not all the families found closure, but many found truth. And sometimes, truth is enough to start breathing again. When the DA called to tell me the Callahans would serve time, I felt not triumphant, not joyful, just lighter, like someone had finally unlocked a cage I hadn't realized I was still standing inside. On the afternoon the news broke publicly, Grace visited with 2 cups of tea. We sat on my balcony, the daisies now taller, leaves reaching past the edges of the pot. Sunlight filtered through them, warming the faint scars on my wrists where anxiety had lived for so long. "You know," Grace said, "there are people who would call what you did revenge." I thought about that. Maybe it is. She shook her head, smiling softly. "It's not. Revenge is about pain. What you did was about truth, about giving a voice to people who didn't get one." I let out a long breath. For a long time, I said, I thought revenge meant making them hurt the way I did. But now I think real revenge is standing here, still whole, still open, still willing to trust. They didn't break me, Grace. They didn't break us. She touched the daisy leaves gently. No, they didn't. We go to group every Thursday now. I volunteer to sit with newcomers who are too afraid to speak. Grace brings homemade cookies no one actually eats but everyone appreciates. We don't talk about the Callahans much anymore, not because the story hurts, but because it no longer defines us. And sometimes, when someone tells a part of their story, I catch Grace looking at me with quiet gratitude, like the universe gave her a second daughter in the ruins of losing her first. I don't correct her. I don't run from it. I let myself be loved by someone who lost everything and still found room for me. If you're listening to this, if you've ever sat in the dark whispering, maybe I'm imagining it, or maybe it's my fault, or maybe no one will believe me, this part is for you. You are not imagining it. You are not too much. You are not unworthy of safety, or love, or truth. If you're stuck, don't be ashamed to fight. And if you can't fight yet, don't be ashamed to rest. Healing isn't linear, courage isn't loud, and survival isn't pretty. Sometimes the light that saves you isn't your own. It's carried by someone who walked their own dark road before you. For me, that light was Grace. And wherever she goes now, I go too. 2 women, scarred, standing, growing again, like daisies. In the end, I realized revenge isn't making them hurt the way I once did. Real revenge is standing tall after everything, living a life they can no longer touch. It's keeping your heart, even when it's been squeezed so tightly you thought it might never beat again. Andrew and Margot lost everything because of the truth they tried to bury. As for Grace and me, we rebuilt from what they never understood: kindness, trust, and the quiet strength of women who survive. If you've ever walked through a dark doorway in your life, or had someone try to twist the story of who you are, I hope you find a little light in this journey. And if this final part touched something in you, a memory, a feeling, or a question you haven't dared to speak aloud, leave a comment. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be poetic. It just needs to be real. Who knows? Your words might accidentally become the way out for someone trying to step out of their own darkness.